The rubric for creative writing is very similar to all the other rubrics for the area of study. Demonstrate understanding of discovery. So in other words, your creative writing is going to hook into concepts about discovery. And you're going to, in the last dot point, organise, develop and express ideas using language appropriate to audience purpose and context. In other words, you're going to have a strong idea or ideas and you're going to answer the question. You're not going to just learn a creative piece of writing off by heart and hope it fits. You're actually going to respond to the question that's there. The Marking Centre wanted structural complexity. And I'm going to talk about all these in a moment. They wanted cohesion. It all comes together. They wanted authentic, sustained and engaging voice. So writing about travelling to Mars is not going to be authentic, sustained and engaging because you haven't been there. Originality and perceptiveness. They wanted confident control of language, the mechanics. So this is the one where you really need to think about paragraphing. You can't be an A if you forget paragraphing. You need to think about your actual punctuation because teachers will notice it in the writing task. Now, when I look at the aspects of the rubric, and I'm just going to touch on a few of these, we can see how easily it is to come up with creative writing. Discovery can encompass the experience of discovering something for the first time or rediscovering something that's been lost, forgotten, or concealed. Think about the possibilities. I said about the photograph. It could be travelling to a new place, the sights, the sounds, the smells. I remember standing in Venice on the Rialto watching a young man write a postcard, and he looked up at me and smiled. He said, "I'm writing to my mum." He said, "She'll never get this." He said, "She actually passed from cancer last year." He said, "But I write a postcard for every city in Europe that I've been to, and I'm tying a ribbon around them, and I'm going to keep them for my children when I have them." So she actually gets to travel and be with me, even though she's not here. So that beautiful moment, that touching moment, I won't forget. And so there's things like that on your journeys in life. It could just be travelling to Nobby's Beach and watching the sunset. It could be just walking in the sand and seeing those waves, actually eating away at the sand and the surfer out the back and freewheeling on a wave. Then the second one is discoveries can be sudden and unexpected or emerge from a process of deliberate and careful planning. So for example, now you're thinking about the process of discovery. So you might think about a scientist and you might have done your research. You might absolutely love and be fascinated by someone from the past like Leonardo da Vinci. Or you might go forward to the atomic bomb and you might look at someone like Oppenheimer. And you might actually research it and talk about this planned discovery, but then the terrible discovery at the end that they make. Discoveries can be fresh and intensely meaningful from the rubric in the ways that are emotional, creative, intellectual, physical, and spiritual. And they can be confronting or provocative. I want you to think about the final paragraph, and that's when before the HSC marker, they read that final paragraph and then they're going to put their mark on the sheet. Make that paragraph absolutely remain with them. And that's where you can uncover the discovery. It doesn't have to be at the beginning. It might be that final paragraph, which certainly that structure that you think about can capture that moment. A really easy structure is called the elliptical. And this is if you struggle with writing. I don't know about you, but gee, it's hard to write the ending of a story. I used to make my students write backwards. But this is one way you can do it. It's so easy. Start and end in the same place. Actually start where in a place, write your story, go back in time, for example, and come back to exactly where you started, except there's a discovery. There's an epiphany. There's the light comes on. There's that moment. I'll go back to Oppenheimer. I want you to think about how they would have felt when they were looking at the making of the atomic bomb. They were elated. They were so excited. They were cut off from society. They weren't allowed to see what was happening in the world. So a lot of what they were doing was in isolation, and it was about the science. It was about the whole process of discovery. But when he saw the first atomic bomb test, he changed. And after the dropping of that bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, he was horrified. And he was left in terrible despair. So that could be a fascinating story. You'd actually start with that despair. You could go through and backwards in time to the bomb itself, to that initial point of elation, and then end again with him and that despair that he felt. So implying the rubric then, you've really got to think about how to represent the perspectives and the sensory experiences of the characters. You need to think about what the discovery leads to. Does it lead to new and transformative insights? Or in fact, even unwanted revelations? You need to think about your own personal discoveries. I find the best writing comes from you. It comes from what you know and you've experienced. So think about your own life. Are there discoveries you've made? Why and how did it occur? What was that experience like? And not just thinking about your feelings. I want you to think about your senses. Remember, perception is about the way we see the world past our senses. Can you remember the smell? Was there a certain perfume in the room? Was there something there when you made that discovery? Was there a sound? Was there a music you associate with it? How does that impact then on your perspective and the view of yourself and the wider community? And what are the ramifications? And why is this the case? Remembering it doesn't all have to be positive and suddenly you've got this epiphany and you change, because that's not life. Sometimes people change and there are other times when people just shut that door and walk away. So you need to think about the way you can change it. There's in the rubric again, the experience of discovery in and through your engagement with text. And I started with this earlier, embrace the remix. In other words, look at a range of texts where you can get some great ideas. You look at assumptions about various representations of the concept of discovery. So think about your own context and how that shaped the way you are and who you are. Also in the rubric, it talks about how the composer's choice of language modes, forms and features shapes the representation of discovery. This is where your craft becomes artistry. You need to think about the verbs you're going to use. You need to think about layers of meaning that they could have. And you need to think about the image that you create. So let's start really quickly now from the beginning. Now we've gone through the rubric.